All right. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. We'll get started where everyone else does. As far as earliest childhood memory, what are we getting into?
Oh, Lord. My mom gives me shit all the... Can I swear on the podcast?
Absolutely.
My mom gives me shit all the time because I remember so little of my childhood.
Okay.
And she was such a good mom and did all these exciting things, and I don't remember any of it. And so earliest childhood memory probably goes back to... There was this one Halloween where my brothers and I dressed up in like a joint costume, and I was Tigger. My middle brother, who's 5 years younger, was Pooh Bear.
Okay.
And then my youngest brother, who's 7 years younger, was Piglet.
Nice.
And I think the only reason that correlates is because they were 1, 2, or 3, and I was 7.
Okay.
And then on my youngest brother's 21st birthday, we replicated that same
Nice.
costume
Very
scheme
nice.
because we went to New Orleans for his birthday.
Okay.
So I like to think I remember that Halloween. I could just remember it because I've seen the picture of it,
Yeah.
but something along those lines.
Not super controversial. That's good. Who came up with that scheme as far as that Halloween costume?
My dad is a big Winnie the Pooh guy and
Okay.
like quotes Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
And so I think that was him pushing his agenda onto us as
Okay.
children. He was like,
Yeah.
I always wanted this. So then when we went to New Orleans for my brother's 21st birthday, we made him dress up as Eeyore.
Love it.
Because he's kind of a grumpy, the cloud is always over me guy to begin with.
Yeah.
And so he then got to join in the fun 20 years later. And I think he had been waiting 20 years to be a part of that costume. So
That's good. Your dad was there for the lighthearted fun. My dad, for one of our Halloween costumes, he thought it would be a good idea to be FBI terrorists. So we wore suits and turbans.
Stop. So he made it like a semi-racial Halloween
Oh,
costume.
absolutely. And I'm trying to think if this was definitely post 9/11. So this is
of course.
maybe where I get some of my humor from.
Yeah.
And then I think one of the other years he was a out of work Pokemon. So he put like dirt on his face and had like cardboard box cut out and said like will work for like cash or whatever it was, but with a Pokemon costume. That's what he was wearing.
Are all Pokemon homeless?
I think they
I
have
was
the
going to say a homeless Pokemon,
they have the Pokeball.
but they go into the Pokeball, I guess.
Or they're hanging out in the grass.
But wouldn't you then rather be a homeless Pokemon because they're the ones that haven't been captured yet? So
Could
they're
be.
like out in the wild.
Could be.
Do you remember when that game
Oh,
was on the
absolutely.
iPhone and
Yeah.
everyone was, but people were like getting hit by cars and stuff
Oh,
chasing Pokemon?
100%.
That came and died faster than anything has ever come in. Like, do people still play that?
100%. I have friends that still play that.
For real?
Yeah. So when it first came out, I was doing construction and I
Yeah.
just see like a bunch of people outside. I'm like, this isn't normal.
No.
And then
Climbing the fences.
we got laid off, and then one of my buddies like, hey, come play Pokemon. And I'm like, absolutely, like, let's go. So we would just like, I remember the first night I was like, caught some Pokemon, got some eggs, and I knew that if you walked a certain amount, like your eggs would like hatch faster. So I was just like running around downtown Batavia, just like, let's go. This is fantastic. But
Yeah.
it was weeks, if not months, of just aggressively playing this game because I was laid off at the point. I loved being laid off.
That became the job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was good fun. So other than Halloween, let's go elementary, middle school. Did we enjoy school at all? Were we just hanging out with our buddies afterwards? What did school look like for us?
So I now own 2 gyms and
Yep.
train tons of athletes. I was never an athlete as
Yeah.
a kid, really. So I've never been on a school sports team. I was bullied a lot, and it's not going to become the bullying podcast, but I was bullied a lot in junior high,
Yeah.
which I think then I figured out that I could be really cool in high school by
Okay.
doing drugs and drinking alcohol.
Nice.
So then I became a naughty kid through high school
Yeah.
and into college. And so those are not my most favorable memories,
Yeah.
especially high school, just because I was like not a good dude and
Yeah.
not a good kid. But I think everything that happens to you, whether it's good or bad, shapes who you are in
Yeah.
the present day. And I like what's going on
Yeah.
now. And so I think it was all influential. But no, I don't look back at high school and like, damn, those were the best days. I was on the football team type
Right.
of thing because I just wasn't.
Yeah. And fourth grade, I think someone called me fat once, and I was just like devastated for years. Yeah, I thought I was fat as can be. one, my thyroid did stop working, but I go back and look at pictures. I'm like, I wasn't as fat as I thought I was. Like, that's wild. Like, I wouldn't take my shirt off in the locker room.
Other people's perceptions of you at that age, you care so much what everyone thinks about you. And it's funny to look back on that now, and like, you have kids that are coming up on that age where you're going to have to deal with that, where everything is the worst thing to ever happen. And I think it's probably tough as a parent because now you have the hindsight to be like, yo, that doesn't matter at all, and it won't be a big deal. But you have to like be with them and be like, oh, I'm really sorry that happened, when really you may just want to be like, who cares?
Right.
Come on.
What was going on in middle school? Like, what was the bullying about there?
I was a massively small kid.
Okay.
So I was like the smallest person graduating our 8th grade class, men and females. So I think I was under 5 feet tall and under 100 pounds going into high school.
Okay.
And at that age, when you're the small one, you're just the one that gets picked on.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I didn't gravitate towards more organized sports either. Because at a young age, I played sports and then everyone got bigger. And it's hard to be good at sports when you're so much smaller than everyone else. So kind of gave those up. Ended up getting into boxing my sophomore year of high school.
Go.
Boxed competitively for like 4 years. I was never very good at it, but I was good enough, and it was something I could do while still like smoking cigs and getting drunk on the weekends, because it kind of had that like hardo edge to it.
Yeah.
And I pretty much thought I was ghetto in high school because obviously if you grow up in Naperville, you're like the most ghetto person in the world.
What was your mom buying you FUBU socks because she knew you liked the color of them?
I definitely had a FUBU hat. I don't know if I had FUBU socks. I don't think so. But I did get my first tattoo was on my 18th birthday.
Okay.
And obviously, because I was ghetto, I got a Tupac tattoo.
Let's go.
So it was this cross with scales on the side that were imbalanced, and it had like this crooked crown on the top, and under it said, "Only God can judge," because God was the only one that could judge me and no one else could. And to this day, I have so many tattoos.
Yeah.
It's the only one I've ever gotten that I was like, oh, I wish I didn't have that. And I got it covered up over COVID because I was like, it doesn't really align with who I am anymore.
Yeah. Well,
But
and it's funny that there's now on Instagram, it's pretty much just like Naperville memes of just like, yeah, it's pretty much Chicago out here. It's like the toughest place you can be. And it's just making fun of
send me those.
Naperville.
I haven't seen them.
Oh, yeah, I'll send them your way.
They do call it the Compton of Illinois, I think. I've heard that.
So when you got into boxing, what was your introduction to that? Was it, I don't know if there's Groupon back then, but like, how did you get into boxing?
This is a good story.
All right,
Are you
I'm
ready?
here, I'm
You've
here for
really
the stories.
pulled it out now.
I'm here for the stories.
So I think it was sophomore year of high school. I'm this small kid. And in math class, there was this kid, and I can't believe I remember his name because I don't remember anything. His name was Tyler Coltez.
We're going to tag him.
And tag him. I don't even know. I don't follow him. I don't know what he's up to, but tag Tyler Coltez. And in math class, I can't remember what it was about, but we got into some type of disagreement. And he was kind of a tougher kid. And that disagreement ended with him being like, we'll settle this at the hole after school. And at Naperville North, the hole is a hole in the fence in the back of the senior parking lot that everyone cuts through to go to their cars. And it's where people have historically met up to fight.
Yeah.
Like in the movies, the school shows
That's
up
fantastic.
and fight. And so math class ends, and I'm immediately like, what the fuck? Like, what am I going to do? I have no idea what to do. I've never hit anyone. I've never been hit. I didn't wrestle, nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm scared shitless, but I'm like, I can't not show up to the fight because that's going to be worse than getting your ass kicked, right?
Okay.
So school ends, and I'm like having a panic attack, but I'm like, I got to go. I got to do this thing. So I roll up to it, and I walk up to him, and I've got myself on a 10 out of 10 adrenaline level. And I'm like, all right, let's do this thing. And he's like, no, someone saw cops over there. We've got to like go to this other location to fight. And in my head, I'm like, bro, this is it. Like, this is the only moment I have to do this. Otherwise, I'm going to check it out. So I'm like, no, we've got to do it here. And he turns and he walks away. He's like, no, we're going over here. And I spin him around. And I'm like, we're doing it right now, right? I'm panicked. And he's like, no, we've got to go over here. And he walks away again. And then I was like, if you walk away again, I'm going to hit you. And he was like, dude, relax. We're going over here to fight. And I kid you not, there has to have been, in my head, there was 10,000 people there. There was probably 100 though.
Wow.
And he walked away again. And I was like, this is it. So I spin him around, and with everything in my body, I do the giant crow hop.
Yeah.
And I punch him across the face, and I basically expect him to be dead that I've hit him so hard. Like, I might have just shattered his face into 1,000 pieces. And instead, he takes the hit, he turns right back towards me, and I was like, what the fuck? And then he proceeds to absolutely beat the shit out of me in front of what felt like the entire school.
Yeah.
I was concussed. I was puking the rest of the day. He really like had it at me. And so once I came back from that a couple days later and overcame some of the embarrassment, but at least I showed up and I did the thing.
Yeah.
The next thing I did was like, hey, Mom, I think I want to start boxing.
Yeah.
And I found a boxing gym. It was in Aurora, and I went there. It was called Jab Fitness at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So we trained out of Jab, and then we sparred at another spot in Aurora. I don't remember the name of that. And then I did that up until college and a little bit when I went to college, summer after college.
Yeah.
And then I kind of was done with that.
Did you start picking fights in high school once you started to move around a little bit, or what was the scenario there?
No, because high school, I was still like kind of getting my confidence.
Yeah.
When I went to college then, I thought that I was even cooler
Yeah.
than in high school because I was drinking more alcohol and doing more drugs than I was doing in high school.
Yeah.
So that kind of sparked a fight mentality of like
Yeah.
being the cool guy and picking those things, which honestly is one of the things I look back at in my life with like a lot of remorse and regret over, because I did just pick fights in those first few years of college for absolutely no reason other than I thought it was fun and I thought I was capable of it.
Yeah.
So that was not ideal, but it did kind of create that like tough guy mindset.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that was a healthy thing or an unhealthy thing.
As far as
In retrospect.
the drugs and the drinking goes, I feel like at Batavia, it was more of like the working class kids, and then Geneva right next to it was maybe like there were the managers of the offices, so
Yeah.
like they had a little bit more drinking, not so much in the drugs. But then you had St. Charles, which I dated a girl from St. Charles, and that was like the hardcore drugs. And like,
Were they
it
the
just-
bougie ones?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
They had so much extra time.
Yeah.
Like they weren't working. They like whatever it was, their parents were gone all the time. Just they were probably working. And then Naperville was also known to have some affluence and a lot of time
Sure.
on their hands. So like for me, I never really got into drugs. I wasn't cool enough to get invited to parties, but it just wasn't. It wasn't super available to me.
Yeah.
What was it like? How were you introduced and stuff like that?
I got introduced slowly over high school. It started with, I think a lot of people smoke weed in high school. And so it started with smoking weed, and then it progressed to alcohol. And weed was never really my thing. I'm a very high-strung and energetic person.
Yeah.
And I didn't really like the calmer side of taking drugs. But then low-key, it was in high school that I got introduced to cocaine,
Yeah.
which became like the thing. And that was sick. And then that continued.
So
through
how does that
college.
introduction happen? Because I think it was Mike. I could be wrong, but as you know, at Amplify,
Yeah.
he said when he was on a trip, it was like some guy in a back alley offered him weed, and it's like that's how I got started. But
For
like,
real?
I'm gonna have to go back and look. But like, what was your like introduction to it? You don't have to shout out whoever it was.
I'm not going to put anyone on blast that could end with the cops coming to their place. But no, I had a buddy. Weed was through a buddy who was one of my best friends at the time.
Yeah.
He liked smoking weed. Where we got the weed, I don't even know.
Yeah.
The harder drugs came from another friend of mine who was a close friend who had friends. He was kind of the link between the kids that we went to and were friends with high school with. And
Yeah.
then from when he was younger, he had some buddies that had gone down kind of a harder path
Yeah.
with gangs and such. And so he was the link between that. And I remember being at like an after party with him and being offered harder drugs for
Yeah.
the first time and kind of having that moment of like, I don't know, like I never thought of myself as like, yo, I want to see like how far I can take this
Yeah.
and what. It was kind of more of maybe a peer pressure thing, and not that he was pressuring me, but just the atmosphere was
Right.
people doing that.
Yeah.
And I think maybe some of that comes from getting bullied when I was younger and wanting to fit in.
Yeah.
And so I gave it a go and enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then went on to use it. And let's be clear, I was never like a drug addict. It's not like I was bumping lines in the morning before
Right.
going to school or anything, but recreationally for far too long until it came to combat with my life priorities,
Yeah.
which now as a gym owner, it's like, well, obviously I'm not doing drugs ever.
Yeah. Hey, sometimes you got to make it to the 4:30 a.m. and just I need a little help. But well,
Some of the people at my 5 a.m. may be on drugs.
Usually,
I love you all.
When I'm talking to people, they have a healthy relationship with food and stuff like that. But there was one other guy that I had on the podcast that he's like, yeah, I had a healthy relationship with like cocaine. It didn't like ruin my life or didn't ruin like my weekends and stuff like that. But he was able to have it like not control his life. It didn't ruin a lot of things. Like he was able to have a good time. And before that, like I didn't really understand drugs. I've only smoked weed out of an apple once. And then I did edibles at a police station because I was like, where else is going to be the safest thing for me to try this stuff?
How did you end up doing edibles at a police station?
So a buddy of mine is a cop, and he is a drug enforcement officer to where he has certifications. He can go in front of a judge and say, I administered the test, and these are the drugs that we found them on due to whatever this matrix is. So most cops, if they get in front of a judge and a good lawyer, the lawyer is going to be like, hey, did you follow this protocol? Sure. And most likely they did not. So they'll call in my buddy or whoever else is certified to do this. And in order to test and qualify and do these types of things, you need to go through classes. You can bring in whoever you want to these classes. So he was always telling me, like, his wife would come in, she'd come do edibles, and then she'd just give the officers shit and would just, like, yell at them and stuff like that because she could do whatever she wanted. And I'm like, all right, I'm done with construction. I can do edibles now. I can do drugs. Can I come in and do this?
Because in construction, even once it became legal, you still couldn't, correct? Yeah.
Well,
that was the same thing with our union guys.
That always got me a bunch of pay raises because the guys in front of me, they would piss hot, or they'd be like, why is your pee 75? Why is your pee 75 degrees? Obviously, you had something on your leg. And it's like, it was the same guy for like 2.5 years in a row that would keep giving me a pay bump.
Jesus, you're like, bro, come on.
Like,
it can't be that much fun.
Yeah. So then I'm like, hey, like, can I come in and do this with you?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, absolutely. Like, we'll bring the edibles, which is phenomenal, by the way. So he picks me up. His wife's in the car. I have 2 pounds of clementines and a gallon of water with me. I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen, but just in case.
Stay ready. You don't have to get ready.
So we walk into the police station, and I go through like the first room, and there's like 15 to 20 cops there. I was like, I thought it was going to be me, your lieutenant, and your wife, like just doing this little study.
You had 20 spectators for the first time you ate edibles?
The way it went is we walked through that, and then we walked to like the back office. Yeah. And there's 10 other people in there, and it's like I don't know if it was board members, but it was influential people in the community that are there doing uppers, downers, and it's like they brought in their own prescriptions. So it started off with, okay, everyone's here. Let's write down what we're taking. Make sure these are your prescriptions.
Yeah.
By the way, you have to have your own chaperone this time because the last somebody in the police force may have been getting a little rowdy last time. So we're going to need someone to be with you at all points during this event. So I take 5 milligrams. And they're like, okay, everybody take whatever they're taking. Yeah. We'll give you 15, 20 minutes, survey the room, see how we're doing to get the testing done. So I take my 5 milligrams. They're like, oh, how do you feel? It was my buddy at the time. I'm like, I feel good. He's like, okay, here, have some more. And then another cop comes by, just like asking questions. It's like, oh, okay, like how much do you usually take? I'm like, first time. He gets the light on me. He's like, yeah, we're going to cut him off. Like, we're going to give him some time.
Like, hey, you went to a police-sanctioned drug party. Wild. What was your paranoia level during this?
0. I just chill. I felt like I was drunk just without the tummy ache. I'm like, this is great.
Holy cow.
Well, and I thought I was like smooth, ready to go. Like you couldn't tell anything. And then, so the way it went is you take the drugs, they give you half an hour, and then every 2 hours they have 2 different people come in and run tests on you. So they can see what type of drugs you're on, how you do to the test and stuff like that throughout that hour of testing because it's like, oh, this is someone that's been on edibles for an hour. This is someone that's been on edibles for 2 to 3 hours. So you do that a couple different times. But the first test, it was like, okay, I want you to follow my finger. And he's going like this. And they tell you like not to break character or anything like that. Yeah. And I swear this guy's just wiggling his finger. I'm trying so hard not to laugh. My buddy's like walking around in the background.
Dude, this is out of a movie.
Yeah,
this whole thing is out of a movie.
It was great. I was like, you could like offer this to like stay-at-home moms, and they would love this for a night out just to go do this testing.
Well, they'd be counting down the days, making paper chains until it's time to go do it. Well, what were you doing during like the 2-hour window? You just like sat there. You had like video games.
So it was. We would go in. So it was take the drugs, test eyes, make sure like you were high. And then you were going to do your test. So I was in a different room with 2 other officers and my chaperone.
Yeah.
To make sure no shenanigans happened. But they would run. It was like half an hour to 45 minutes of tests on me the whole time. I thought I did pretty good on the test. They're like, oh, his balance is pretty good. I was like,
yeah, I do CrossFit.
Yeah. I was like, I work out. But the funniest thing happened was, so they gave us a break. They brought in like Firehouse subs, demolished that. It was fantastic. I'm pretty sure I ate about 2 pounds of clementines.
Minimum.
It was great. And then another officer comes in. He's like, hey, I just pulled this guy over for, what is it? He had weed in his car. And they're like, yeah, I said, I got this testing going on the next 2 days. Like, you can come in and come do this at the station. And like, I'll take your ticket away. And he's like, and he's telling this to the kid he just pulled over that he's giving a ticket to. The kid's like, I don't know if I believe you.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Wait, I'm in trouble for doing drugs, and the way that I'm going to get out of trouble is by doing the drugs?
Yeah, just come into the police station. Just take your edibles in front of me.
Can you imagine that kid's face at the time? Him just being like,
he's like,
I don't know about this.
I'm going to get back to you on that. Like,
can I get that in writing and have my lawyer look at it first?
He ended up doing it the next day, which like everyone was calling. It's like, he came. That's hilarious.
Oh, God.
But yeah, that was like the second time I did edibles. And like my introduction, very slow and just very, I feel like I have an addictive personality, so I try not to push it too far because like I got into gambling. I'm like, this is great. Like I won a hand. It's like, here we go. We're going to Vegas. But as far as like yourself went, it seems like cocaine was a good time, but it wasn't the only time that you were looking for.
Correct. I think you mentioned something about one of the guys you interviewed, and he could have a healthy relationship with drugs. And honestly, I don't know him. I don't want to judge people, but I don't know if I buy that. I think that we convince ourselves, like I would have convinced myself at any of those times that I was drinking too much or using drugs, that I did have control of it and I had a healthy relationship with it. Because like I said, it's not like I was like fiending for my next fix.
Yeah.
But I think that that's something that substances like that do to you, and you think you have control. But like, really, why do you ever need to take drugs?
Yeah.
It's probably doesn't align with like what you want your life to look like and where you want it to go.
Yeah.
So I don't think that anyone needs to. And it's something like now we're on the precipice we were talking about before we got on here of having our first kid probably in the next 3 weeks, which is wildly exciting. And like these are stories that I will never share with my daughter as a child because I don't want to set up that precedent of like, all right, you could do this and then life might turn out okay. Because for so many people, it doesn't, right? And it ends up into this spiral. So I think the more you can just avoid those, it's just not necessary.
Well, and I would say in his defense, it was more of as much as a college person could. Like he didn't drop out. He still graduated.
He was still getting things done. Yeah.
He was still getting things done. As far as college goes, when you were in high school, where you're saying, hey, I need to get better grades at here because I need to go to this college, what was the path that you saw yourself going on before college, and how did you get there?
I think, it's funny. You're supposed to be 16, 17, maybe 18 years old and decide what you want to do for the rest of your life. And so, which is a wild concept. But I had a really good history teacher
Mm-hmm.
in high school, and I found history super interesting. And so I always knew I wanted to go and be a teacher, is
Yeah.
what I planned to go to college for. And there wasn't a part of me in high school. School in high school came relatively easy to
Yeah.
me. So I got pretty decent grades. And I never like had the aspirations of I need to get better than decent grades because I want to go to
Right.
some Ivy League school. I always knew I'd go to an in-state school. So I got accepted to the only school I really wanted to go to was Illinois State.
Okay.
And so that's why I got
the
accepted.
Redbirds, right?
Redbirds,
Okay.
baby. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So that's where I ended up going down to college. I applied to a couple other schools, but once I got accepted there, I knew I was going to go there. My best friend from high school went there, so we went down there together to be roommates. And I went to ISU for 5.5 years
Let's get
to get my bachelor's degree.
Still counts?
It still counts, but I think I switched between maybe 5 different majors before leaving there. And part of the drugs and alcohol thing, it was my junior year, and I actually failed out of my major, my second major, which then failed me out of the school. So while I was still a student, I had to reapply to the school and to a new major in order to transition and stay in school there.
Yeah.
I had a couple of really good friends that I'd befriended over the first few years who kind of stepped in because my plan was to drop out of school and probably join the Marines. And they came to me and were like, hey, you're not, I had stopped going to class. I was failing out of everything.
Yeah.
And they were like, that's not who you are. And there is a better path for you. And you need to finish school. You're already 3 years into
Your
it.
friends are
Like,
saying this?
My friends
Wow,
did, yeah.
Those are some good friends.
Such good friends. And they were guys that I wasn't living with at the time, but they were like, hey, fourth year, which was senior year, but it
Right.
wasn't my senior year. They were like, you're going to live with us
Yeah.
and we're going to like turn this around. And so those guys would be standing in my doorway when I was supposed to go to class.
Yeah.
Because I would ditch class all the time to just sleep in or whatever. And they'd be standing there like, yo, you got to get up out of bed. You've
Yeah.
got class in 45 minutes. And I really do credit them. To this day, they're still
Yeah.
some of my best friends in the whole world.
Oh, some
I
good friends.
massively credit those guys to putting me on the path that has led me here because without them,
Yeah.
I don't know what life would have looked like.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Really good. And to be 21 years old and
Yeah.
for them to have that priority of me and helping to shape me into who I should be.
Yeah.
I mean, just some really, really good dudes.
That's fantastic. So what did your major the majors that you were going into, what were the transitions and why were you picking different majors?
So I started as a history major and then I went into history education. And then that's the one I ended up failing out of. And then the lowest required GPA to apply back to
Yeah.
was the generalized business. So I started in business administration. And then I went into marketing as part of business. And then what I ended up graduating with was a marketing professional sales major.
All
So it was
right.
maybe one of 10 universities at the time in the country that had a professional sales
Yeah.
major. I was generally pretty good with people and speaking in front of people.
Yeah.
And that ended up your, what do they call them? Your major classes were basically public speaking.
Nice.
And then doing mock sales. They had this little classroom where you would literally, or not, it was almost like a boardroom where you would walk up and you'd knock on the door and there'd be someone on the other side and you would do this whole
Yeah.
mock sales thing and it live streamed it into your actual classroom. So then everyone would critique you and
Yeah.
write down what you should have done better. And so as far as majors go and application to
Yeah.
what you do post-college, learning to speak in front of people and
Right.
have those conversations is actually a pretty useful skill.
Oh,
So I was
100%.
thrilled with how that path ended up leading me
Yeah.
to, because I did go into sales after college.
Yeah.
But I think it really was more of a luck of the draw thing than like,
Yeah.
I super love marketing and I super love sales. That's
Right.
just kind of where I found myself.
Yeah. As far as that marketing class or that sales class goes, do you remember any like the best opening line or like the best like do you still remember any of those?
You know what? Shout out to ISU and their sales major. Because I've since read several sales books, especially when I worked in sales. There's that Wolf of Wall Street book.
Yeah.
And a lot of those books are based around like exactly what you're saying. Like, what's that closer? What's that manipulation game?
Yeah.
And what they taught at school was really what I have found actually works in the real world.
Yeah.
And that's building around relationships,
Yes.
right? And if people trust you and they like you, they're way more likely to buy something from you
Yeah.
than if you're the sleazy. Like, how much do you hate it if you go in to look at shoes and they keep coming up and being like, yo, wouldn't you look sick? And you're like, dude, please stop. You're
Yeah.
giving me the icky ickies.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I sold newspapers when I was younger, then I
Yeah.
sold windows, and then I sold painting, and then I got into car sales for a little bit.
Who'd
'cause
you
I
sell
thought-
windows for?
they had quadruple pain or whatever. It was you bought like the franchise. I worked there for maybe like a month or two.
Okay.
I sold to this one woman that like her husband just passed away. I'm like, you really don't need windows, but
And I
my
just
boss
did
is
it
right
to you.
there. I had to book this call. But like I was reading getting to yes or like getting to whatever,
Yeah.
like all those stuff. And then I was like, okay, like when I was doing the car sales, I'm like, I just got 30 no's and now I'm almost there. It's like I gotta learn EBITDA, like what, or like what's happening here? And it's like if I sell them something high and they want something low, we'll definitely meet in the middle. And then I was just like, oh, Chris Voss's book is like don't split the difference, and it's like actually talking to people. And then I think one's like extreme communicators. It's like just becoming like a friendly person. It was like, oh, that's what I usually did, but then all these books were telling me to do something different.
And you're like, yeah, it must be what they wrote in this book instead of like what you know in your heart is the actual way. Like you just look at it like this, who would you want to buy something from?
Yeah.
Not the guy who's trying to like play mind games with you and twist you up. It's like the person that you can have a conversation with and you feel like they're feeding you the truth instead of feeding you some story that's going to get you to like tricked into buying something.
For sure. So when you graduate, were you doing an internship somewhere that was like, hey, we'd love to have you come work for us, or how'd you get to your next position?
No, so I ended up, my last year and a half of college, I took a job as just like a salesperson.
You can make noise for sure, just a heads up. As long as you're not like 7 inches from the mic, you're good.
You see those thick ass legs? Every time he steps, it makes noise.
I know he's trying to be quiet.
King Thunder Daddy over there. My last year and a half of college, I took a job at a nutrition store, Complete Nutrition in Bloomington. And I worked there for a couple of months, and the assistant manager quit, and I took that job. And then the store manager quit, and I took that job. And then the district manager got promoted, and so I ended up being the district manager of that.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah, so I was managing 4 stores, and so when I started applying for jobs, I was at a job fair.
Yeah.
And I had interviewed with Sherwin-Williams.
Oh, yeah.
And I accepted a job with Sherwin-Williams to sell paint.
Yep.
Thrilling. And so
were you selling paint or were you selling door to door? Because that's who I sold paint.
Is it?
Yeah.
No, so it was going to be the corporate side, the business to business side. So instead of gallon of paint, it was like, I don't know, 10,000 gallons of paint.
Okay.
I had a start date and everything with them. And then I really enjoyed the interviewing process. I thought it was this fun challenge. And so I ended up getting offered an interview with Otis, the elevator company.
Okay.
And I went in to meet with them, and their interview process was intensive. You had to interview with 4 people, and you had to give a presentation on your school just to see how your speaking skills were.
Yeah.
And I loved how intensive their interview process was. And then when they offered me that job, I was like, boxes that go up and down, paint drying.
Yeah.
I'll go with the electronic boxes that go up and down. So that's how I ended up with them. It was literally just a job fair.
Yeah. Do you have any interesting stories from being a store manager at a nutrition place? Because I feel like whenever I go to a supplement store, like I'm either just going to get creatine or a little bit of protein or some energy drink. But then everybody else that's in there, I'm like, what are you doing here? What are you? I'm confused. I see you're looking to get your health, but it doesn't seem you're making the choices to do that. While you were working in a nutrition store, what were you seeing there?
So Complete Nutrition, and I don't even know if that store still exists or that chain, to be honest, but they were a little bit different than your typical GNC or vitamin shop. So they were what they called like a consultant base.
Oh, nice.
So people would come in with like more, and some people came in and were like, yo, I'm picking up my protein.
Yeah.
But kind of their MO and their niche was, hey, these are my goals. What supplements are going to help me get there? Yeah. And so our staff had to be maybe more knowledgeable than your typical checkout staff. But what we sold and what was kind of the bread and butter of that store was back when pro hormones were legal.
Okay.
And so we sold pro hormones, which worked wildly well. And so people came back. Why did they work so well? Probably because they're now what would be categorized as steroids. And then we also sold weight loss kits. which had ephedrine in them at the time. And so those worked
Very
really well
effective.
too. It was while I was there that ephedrine became banned. And so they came out with some new weight loss kit that didn't have ephedrine.
Yeah.
But we were very much at that store the type of salespeople we were talking about, where it's like trying to get, how high can I get that ticket price? What else can I get them? And so people would spend, I mean, hundreds of dollars coming in because everyone wants the magic pill, right? And if you tell them this is the magic pill, the nice thing is that ours at the time kind of were magic pills and they worked
100%.
super good.
Oh, yeah.
And so they'd end up getting jacked because they were taking steroids or they were taking ephedrine, which is now, I don't even know if you can get prescribed ephedrine anymore.
Oh,
It's
I'm
basically
sure someone's
speed.
giving it to you.
Someone's got ephedrine. And so they would lose weight. And so then they'd refer their friends, but it was kind of that higher end, more niche supplement store.
That's phenomenal. I feel like steroids are going to make a comeback.
They're making a comeback.
well, right.
TRT is here and in the flesh, baby.
Absolutely. I had the president of the Enhanced Games on before he was on Rogan, and I was like, I want to figure out what's going on.
Was on
here.
this podcast?
Yeah, don't tell anybody. Nobody knows.
I cut that bitch out.
So when I talked to him, he's like, usually when someone wins a race, you go and look at their shoes. Like, I want the same shoes Usain Bolt has or whatever it is. But through the games, it's going to be, this is the stack that he's on. So that's why they have the investors. It's not because they're going to be like, oh, there's so many people are going to watch this. It's because I want the stack that the guy's on that just broke Usain's 100-meter record.
Yeah.
So that's why all the investment people are there, is because they're going to be selling whatever the stack is, but they're going to be very like, you have to have a doctor watching all your heart rate, your EKG, whatever it is, to make sure these guys aren't falling down on the track with a heart attack or whatever it is. And it's going to be really tough for the women because they can't have any heart palpitations or they're going to be out of the competition. And that's what a lot of HGH or testosterone or a lot of those drugs do for the women in the Olympics.
Yeah.
So I feel like once that actually kicks off, it's going to be off to the races.
Here's the thing, though. So I've just became aware of these games recently, and a lot of the podcasts I listen to have been talking about them. And a lot of the S&C community believes, though, that like those really famous records, like track and field, right? That's what people care about the most when you think about the Olympics.
Yeah.
That none of those records are getting broken because the people that are going to participate in these games do not have the genetic capacity that even on top of them, like when you talk about Usain Bolt's 100-meter record, like, yo, there isn't another Usain Bolt. And so if you took him and you gave him PEDs, which was he on PEDs? Maybe, maybe not. Definitely not up until the race.
Right.
Would he have gone
pissed
faster?
clean.
Yes,
That's all
he
that
pissed clean.
matters.
Exactly.
LeBron's fine.
LeBron's fine. But they don't think there is going to be this earth-shattering of records broken like people think they're going to be. But who knows? Like, it'll be super interesting to see.
And it's tough because a majority of Olympians were already on steroids. I think it was like 60% of them were on them. And the way they get past it is they have a chemist change whatever the compound is just a little bit, but that makes it unsafe for the Olympians. And they're already out there not making a bunch of money. Like, I've had a couple on, they're like, I was nannying the next week after I competed in the Olympics. And it's like, oh, like you're pushing your body to the limits just for just a little bit, and then you're back.
Glory.
Yeah. So I think it'll be really interesting. He's a very successful businessman in a lot of other places. And like, I know it's not like a passion project for him. He's done a lot of other big things. So he says that there'll be somebody that breaks Usain's record. Maybe not. But it'll be interesting to see, because I think that will push a lot of people to be like, hey, this is how you can safely take steroids. But also, as far as that goes, just listening to podcasts, I know there's a lot of people taking Ozempic, but for people I hear that are happy to prescribe it, they're also prescribing HGH or steroids or hormones to protect the muscle that they're losing from just not eating enough. I feel like it's a tough position there.
There is. I think that this and like hormone therapy is such a productive thing. And I think sometimes because steroids have been so prevalent in sports for so long, it gets this bad rap of like these people are cheaters or this, that, or the other. But the reality is that like the human body we age. And as we age, certain things happen. And so for years, I mean, decades, hundreds of years, we've been finding ways to combat things that are associated with aging. You look at like the fight against cancer, or all these diseases. The reality is that, like, as a male, my testosterone is going to drop at some point. I'm 35 years old, so hopefully it's not too low now. But at some point it's going to drop, and there are some negative side effects of it dropping. And now, as a medical community, they've come up with a way to help alleviate some of those side effects. And so I fully believe, I tell my wife all the time, that I will absolutely be on TRT at some point. And I will have no shame about that, because I think it's just a medical advancement, and it's healthy to take advantage of that if you have the means to.
Yeah, I would say for not necessarily just being jacked, but the mental clarity that my buddies that are on it.
Yeah.
Shout out. No, I won't say his name yet. I'll let him
He almost got zinged.
He'll be on it. He'll be on it soon. He tells people all the time. But the mental clarity, just from like pure exhaustion from not getting a lot of sleep, sometimes I'm like,
Hugely.
I'm really pumping up this creatine, trying to figure out what's going on. I just try to get some mental clarity back, but. If you got your testosterone up, I hear it's working wonders.
Awesome. I got a bunch of guys in here that take it that are in their 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I mean, it's just the difference maker as far as the energy you have for the day, how you feel, your motivation, your sex drive, all of those things are benefited. It's not just, I want to be the biggest jacked meathead in the gym, so I got to like juice this up. And it's not even necessarily like pumping it to audacious levels. It's just trying to sustain it so that it doesn't fall off.
Well, I was on HGH in middle school to high school because my thyroid stopped working.
Really? And that's how they treated that?
Yeah, I was
Interesting.
definitely not jacked. I was still a fat kid. I was gaining like 10 pounds a month. A lot of it was water weight, but it was waiting for me to get bigger. And they're like, hey, here's some needles. Here's the stuff. You can mix it yourself. People might ask you like to sell this to them. It's not going to be enough for them to actually get any benefits out of it. And I was like, oh man, like I thought I was going to go into high school huge.
Just be an absolute behemoth, a gorilla.
That is not what happened. But so you got to work for a box going up and down. When you are making that decision, is it, hey, like I'm going to make a bunch of money here and then my rest of life kind of comes together? Or how did you see your life going at that point?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it was something that I found not boring. I don't know if I would say interesting, but not boring. I liked the game of sales. I've always been an irritatingly competitive person. It drives my wife nuts. I'll make anything into a competition. And sales is always a competition, right? Whether it's monthly or weekly or quarterly, that rancor comes out. And it's something I used to communicate to my bosses over the years, that I was driven just as much by the money that you made in commissions as I was by seeing my name towards the top of that sales rancor. That and that acknowledgement of performance is what drove me. And so I like the world of sales. Elevators are really expensive, and so that was an exciting thing to be selling, because you're talking about contracts into the $1 million once you move into major projects, which is what I ended up doing for Schindler. And so I think I just like that. It wasn't overly challenging in the sense of I wasn't working 70 or 80 hours a week. You could kind of manage your own schedule, and it allowed you to make a good amount of money, more money than I realized it allowed you to make when I went into it. And so, I ended up doing that. I switched companies, but for 7 years.
So when you're going to sell, are we cold calling, or like, do you have to get to the job before it takes off? What's the process?
So that's the nice thing about selling elevators, is if you're going to build a building of any notable size, you have to put an elevator in it. There are really only 4 companies that sell elevators.
Love it.
And so if you're going to build a building, then you as the developer, or the general contractor, or the architect, generally by the time it's going out for bid, it's the general contractor, send out an RFP to the 4 companies that are going to do it. So you're not ever convincing someone to buy an elevator.
Love it.
You're just convincing them to buy your elevator. Now, you can get in there during the design stage. So I used to fly around the country, primarily with Schindler, and present to architects every week, because the goal is that when they draw up the blueprints, they will draw them up centered around your specifications, which means that every other company now has to get the architect to change the dimensions of the hoistways. And so if you're spec'd in the project, you're more likely to get the sale when it comes. But the sales cycle of elevators is massively long. So you got to think that building goes through endless stages of revisions, maybe 4 years, 3 years, 2 years before it breaks ground.
Yeah.
Those elevators get sold a year before they're actually going to be installed.
Yeah, my family's business is wastewater treatment plants, so
Okay,
they're dealing with municipalities, and
Oh,
they're just
Lord.
like, you guys have money,
Red
right?
tape. Red tape for days. Any type of government organization. At Otis, you're Schindler. At Otis, we actually had like a company policy that we wouldn't bid CPS work because it wasn't worth the hassle of going through all the red tape associated.
So as far as elevators goes, I'm going to be honest. I thought there was just like one company out there, and they all, I didn't know. I was unfamiliar. What are either like pros or cons or some, I feel like they should all kind of be built similar if one's really good. Are they kind of all the same thing with one's just a different version, or?
They're kind of all the same thing. Certain ones, when you get into like less standardized projects, right? If you've got a 5-story building, then everyone's is like kind of the same.
Okay.
When you start getting into like skyscrapers, then there are advantages and disadvantages to each company. But in general, it's just like anything, right? You have the higher quality, higher cost provider, and then you have the lower quality, lower cost provider.
Who's going lower quality for elevators, though?
Oh, most people.
Really?
Yes, you would be shocked. Now, lower quality does not mean less safe necessarily. Because,
so not like an airplane lower quality.
Correct.
Gotcha.
There's a certain level of safety that's required for your company to stay in business. If people start dying on your elevators, it's really bad for business. Like, that's the end-all, be-all.
Yeah.
So, like, Otis was known, when it came to elevators, not escalators, Otis was known as, like, the higher quality provider. And so with that came a higher price tag. And so it was trying to convince people that for their more money, they got things that were going to last longer, have these additional bells and whistles, this and that. The second company I went to work for, Schindler, was kind of the lower quality or the more cost-effective provider. And so when you were selling on smaller buildings there, it was really selling on price. And
Gotcha.
like, all right, hey, you might not be able to do all these fancy customizations or this and that.
Yeah.
But look at my price tag. It's $30,000 under theirs per unit. So like,
oh, that's great.
Oh, huge.
So when you go into elevators now, are you like, and are you spitting off random dad facts?
I was forever. And I used to like joke about it. My wife hated it. Everyone hated it. But I used to drop things all the time. Now I think, so I have this theory. You only have so much room in your brain.
Okay.
And I don't have a massive brain.
Yeah.
And so I don't pay attention to professional sports and keep up with that.
Yeah.
Because I only have enough room to care about the things that I need to and enjoy caring about, which really is the fitness industry, which I am a nerd about. And so I think in an effort to make room for those things, I have slowly let go of elevator-related facts. I'm sure I could still drum up some goofy-ass facts about them.
Yeah.
But in general, no, I don't go in elevators very often anymore because now I'm a suburban person.
Yeah.
You know, I don't live in the city no more. And so not that many elevators, but it's still like when you walk through an elevator, a lot of times either on the threshold of it or on the COP, it's called car operating panel, boom, elevator fact. You may see the name of the company. So sometimes I do glance at that to see if it was one of the two companies I worked for.
Okay, so we'll get out of that, except for what is the either best or worst story you have from your 7 years in elevator work?
The best or worst story, the worst story is that everyone thinks that they're the most clever person on the planet. And so the number of times that I got this joke, how's the elevator business? Bet it has its ups and downs. I can't even count on all of my hands and all of my toes of everyone I know. And half the group tells that knowing it's the worst joke ever. And I probably hear it all the time. The other half thinks they're the first person to ever come up with that joke. And you have to be like, that's a good one.
I appreciate a good dad joke, and I usually see him coming, but you're
right.
That's rough. That's rough.
Dude. And like on repeat from so many people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear that joke one more time, then you say, fuck it, I'm out of this business. I'm done.
I'm sure that's it.
How do you make the move to wherever you went next?
To opening downtown's gym?
Okay, so you went straight from boxes up and down to one box staying in the same spot.
One box. There was a dad joke. That was good. So I I started CrossFit in 2013.
Okay.
13, 14. And I walked into a CrossFit gym, and I'd been lifting for years, you know, a lot of bench press, a lot of bicep curls, occasionally a deadlift, never a squat. And I thought that I was maybe like one of the fittest humans to ever step onto the planet Earth.
Nice.
Because you could kind of see my abs, and I could bench 3 plates. And so I was basically, I was basically Hercules. Now, keep in mind, I was 205 pounds at the time, and I had never lifted legs ever. And so now I lift legs all the time, not that you can tell, but I'm 170 pounds.
Yeah.
So I was 35 pounds heavier, all in the upper body.
That's phenomenal.
Reference pro hormones from our earlier discussion.
I was about to ask. I was like, what was your stack? I know what your stack was.
And that was it. I was coming out of college, and that was when I started CrossFit. So I walked into the CrossFit box, which was FTX at the time. It used to be in Carroll Stream. They're in a new location now.
Yep.
And I walked in there thinking that I was just going to decimate everyone. And I got absolutely humbled by everyone. Middle-aged women, teenage, like everyone just cooked me. And in that like puddle of mud on the ground, I was like, holy shit.
Do you remember what your first workout was?
No. And everyone asks that because I tell this story all the time. And I think maybe I've mentally blocked it out because it was so mortifying. But I have no idea what it was, and I wish for the life of me I could remember.
Yeah, we'll go back and modify before they were before they were
Before I
around.
even did it, it was probably written on the whiteboard somewhere. I want to say it was like an on-ramp class too, and so
on-ramp back then is wild. That's great.
It probably wasn't that challenging, but for me it was so hard.
Yeah.
But I had that moment of like, and we've seen it over the years. You see so many people have it. I joke though that men will often either be like, "Holy shit, this is what I should be doing.
Right.
This is actual fitness," which is the reaction I had. But then I've seen a lot of dudes be like, "I'm going to go back to the world I was in and just keep pretending that I'm fit because I can bench. This is dumb. Why do they do this?" But that led me down like falling in love with CrossFit.
Yeah.
But then after 3 or 4 years of CrossFit, and I got really into it and competing and training probably way too much.
Yeah.
I just started accumulating injuries and not accumulating forward progress.
As the CrossFit way.
Super often, and way too often, though, in CrossFit, that's accepted as the reality.
Right.
It's like, oh, no, once you're like 4 or 5 years in, you don't really get any better, and you're kind of just always nursing injuries.
Yeah.
And, hey, that does not have to be, nor should that be, how your training goes on forever. And for me, it was a torn rotator cuff and labrum that was the final straw, and I was like, fuck this, like this is fun, but I can't do this anymore because this isn't sustainable and I want to work out forever. So I started training at East Bank Club in Chicago by myself. But fortunately, at the time, I was flying all over the country almost weekly for the elevator company.
Yeah.
So I was flying to different markets and presenting to different clients. So what I started doing is aligning those trips with different seminars, certifications, conferences throughout the fitness industry.
Nice.
I developed an obsession with reading books, taking more online certifications. And this wasn't CrossFit. Yeah, I did the CFL one. I did a couple of their smaller courses. But this was stuff through NSCA. It was through OPEX. It was down in Austin going to On It.
Yeah.
It was doing some strength and conditioning work. It was everything I could think of, the whole kin stretch path.
Yeah.
And it was like more at the early stages in an effort to, what am I going to do with my own training? Because I love training so much for the next decades of my life. But what I started to connect in my head and where I ended up opening the gym is I'm like, all right, I'm working out at East Bank Club. My headphones are in all the time. I'm not talking to anyone. I'm doing my own workouts, which 5 rounds becomes 3 rounds. And it just doesn't have that drive. And it's not fun. And it kind of fucking sucks. But then I'm like, all right, there's this super fun world of CrossFit. But from what I'm reading and what I'm learning and what people are telling me, there's this whole world of strength sciences that has existed for decades where they have studied how do we progressively and systematically provide stimulus to an organism, i.e. a human, in a progressive way to overload it without overloading it to a point of injury. And how do we set that up in a periodized model that potentiates itself over time? And CrossFit, which is so fun and why we love fitness, they do basically ignore this science, and they base everything they teach at the L1 off of anecdotal evidence of their community, which has not been studied. And so I'm like, all right, what if we take this style of exercise that is CrossFit, but we apply this entire world of strength sciences to the programming within the gym so that people aren't getting hurt with the same frequency and that they are continuing to progress, not just in those beginner gains, but for years and years to come. And that's kind of what brought this idea of Jaguar Strength and Conditioning, and what ended up with me being like, yo, I think I have something here. I think this is a hole in the market.
Yeah.
I'm going to open a gym and see if I can teach other people what I think is productive and what can keep them engaged with their fitness while also progressing.
Well, I think you hit on it right there. The engaged in your fitness is a tough one, because when I was coaching, we had a gymnast from Iowa come in, and our coach was like, this guy's in phenomenal shape. He knows all this gymnastics stuff. We're going to be doing all this stuff. But if you're doing gymnastics work, that's boring. You are not doing high repetitions. You are doing bicep curls.
Yeah,
You're like just holding the bar over your head.
It's got to be exciting.
Yeah, and a lot of members would just stop coming in on Tuesdays or whatever the day was. And it's like, you have this specialist that's going to get you a million times better on all the things you're complaining about, but we're not doing a EMOM with a 10-second rest of handstand push-up. Like, it's just it's tough, because the CrossFit model, when taking the level 1, it seemed there's a very big menu that you can choose from, and I think a lot of the coaches, it's just hard to pick the right foods or whatever it is.
Sure.
But like you got to keep the people entertained, or they're not going to come back. Like, it could be, when I had clients, I'm like, I can give you the best 2-day program. We're going to do the cardio in the morning, because you're not going to get as strong, because later on we're going to push the weights. But you're going to have to commit 2 to 3 hours to this and then eat right. It's like, you're not going to do it.
You're not going to do that.
Because you came in with an already super busy life and you just want to sweat for 45 minutes.
Correct.
So it's really tough to get the people in there. How did you market yourself so well here?
I did a terrible job of marketing when we first opened. And honestly, it's because I was like, if you build it, they will come.
That's what they say. That's what the people say.
Field of dreams, duh. He built it, they came. So downtown, I built it. And keep in mind, I opened the downtown gym in December of 2019. Ideal time to open a gym. And I opened those doors, and literally I remember talking to my brother. So my middle brother moved out here from Philly to help me open the gym. I remember being like, yo, we got to be prepared when like everyone's coming through the door and this, that, and the other. And we opened and nobody came through the door. And then nobody came. And I spent so much money on idiotic marketing opportunities. Like, I had a billboard on the side of the Liquor Box bar at one point downtown that I paid like 10 grand for, and it never generated a single human walking through the door. What I found over the years is that word of mouth is really how you build a business. Word of mouth and social media. My wife handles our social media, and now we have a content team that's in-house that does an awesome job with that. But really, it's just about, all right, when you have 2 members, because that's how many I had when I opened, 2 people joined, then that's a very small pool of people that they know that when they're having progress, they end up bringing in. And then when you have 10 members, that's 5 times the amount of people that you're touching with your results. So from 0 to 10 was a slow growth. From 10 to 30 was a slow growth. Then COVID came, so that was a really, really, really slow growth. But then as you start to grow and you start to expand, our number one thing that has always been our priority with getting new people in is everyone, and I talk to my coaches about this, every time someone walks through the door is an opportunity to give them the best experience ever. And so all of our coaches are very well versed in what we're doing. They are not just people that are like watching class for a free membership. They are true coaches, so that we can look to improve people. And they need to be in order to run our program, because our program is very complex at its roots. And it's, if you just take care of your people and you make sure that they are consistently getting better, then they'll end up bringing people in. And that's kind of how we've grown through our downtown location, which is, I think we have 170 members downtown. And then we opened this one in October. And so we're just continuing to build on that and trusting that if we do right by people, we'll get people in the door.
So what would you say your secret sauce is to having such a good product?
I think it's the programming and it's the coaching, and I think it's really caring and being passionate about those 2 things. So when it comes to programming, lots of gyms use either a standardized program, right? They get something from Mayhem or from Misfits, or they're all those HWPO. You can pay for a monthly program. The thing that I think is challenging with that, and those are probably written by people that do have a good understanding of science. I've subscribed to some of them before and seen some of the ways they progress things, and they're not awful.
Yeah.
But how do they know whether or not it's effective with your group? So, right, a program needs to be able to modify it. So I'll write out, like right now we have the next 22 weeks already written out, but that doesn't mean they're going to stay exactly as I wrote them. They're going to change as people adapt and as I talk to people and see, is this stimulus getting boring, either to their physiology, to which they're no longer adapting, or just mentally, hey, we've done this same, okay, cool, we need to change things more quickly. And having the ability to change things on the fly, I think, is super valuable. And then the coaching itself, having coaches that are passionate about coaching and aren't just showing up to be a cheerleader, but really understand it and want to see people get better and are willing to invest their time in getting people better is one of the biggest things. I am so blessed with the coaching staff that I have because they are all people that, one, love the sport itself and participate in it very actively, but also understand the intricacies of it so that they can explain those things and help carry those over to our athletes.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that I appreciate the most is when a coach can say, hey, this is the stimulus we're looking for. You don't do RX because you're going to spend 15 minutes when it should be a 7-minute workout.
Bro, I shot a video driving here this morning about Fran. That's literally that. And like, all right, if you have a 9-minute or a 12-minute Fran time, we're no longer doing the thing that Fran is supposed to be, which just means we need to adjust it because we chase stimuluses, not weights and workouts.
Yeah. As far as the coaching and the business side of things go, a lot of CrossFit gyms are closing. What are you doing that's making yours work at the moment?
I think it's just an investment in our people.
Okay.
We have never become complacent with that.
Yeah.
And so whether or not it's hosting events, which we do a tremendous number of events at both gyms, or whether or not it's just being present, like to this day, I own and operate 2 gyms now, and I still coach 15 plus classes a week.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I have calls daily so my brother runs our downtown gym on the day-to-day now. He's in charge down there. We talk every single day about what's going on down there.
Awesome.
My guy, Ross, so me and Ross coach all of our in-house strength and conditioning CrossFit classes here. So we correspond daily. And the nice thing about not having so many coaches is that the coaches understand where you're at in your journey. Like we'll have a daily check-in on what was the morning group doing? Oh, cool. So-and-so started working towards muscle ups.
Right.
Where are they at with that process? So that if I have them next time, I know where they're at in the learning journey. And with that, we can continue to progress them. One of the things that is challenging for me as this gym grows and as the downtown gym grows is that there are more business owner things that need to be done. And I do not like doing accounting and obviously cleaning and all those little things that are required when you open a business because you play all those hats, right? Or you wear all those hats. So it does try to pull you away from the coaching. But one of my goals is never to give up the amount of coaching I'm doing now because that's what really fuels me and fills my soul is the programming side of it and then implementing that program with our athletes.
When you say you host a lot of events, is that you're just having people here and you're doing a game night, or you guys are doing other what kind of events do you guys host?
We do a lot. So we have our in-house competition coming up this Saturday. We have 80 athletes competing in that between the 2 gyms. We actually host 2 of those a year and always have. On top of that, we do a few philanthropies throughout the year. So we do a row raiser in December. We started this past year.
Did you do a rowathon?
We did a half rowathon. Yep. But we made it. We also added some of Murph into it. And so it was my brother's concept.
I was about to say I'm coming over, but nope.
So you're like, oh, no, I just wanted to do the rowing. So we did it as a food drive, too, where every pound of food that your team donates takes a minute off of your row time.
Oh, let's go.
And then we often pit the 2 gyms against each other and stuff because that drives up intensity. We have a philanthropy we do for suicide prevention in May that we started last year, unfortunately, after a member of the gym passed away. So we'll run that again this May. We do a big event for Murph. We just participated in the St. Patrick's Day parade downtown here where we had a float type thing that went through the parade. We have all sorts of stuff throughout the year. The Open we do really big. That's a huge gym versus gym competition. Friday night lights every week. We do in-house challenges throughout the week. So we just find opportunities to get people together outside of their traditional classes because, I mean, you've done CrossFit for a long time.
Yeah.
It is the relationships that keep you coming back and keep you accountable to showing up day in and day out.
Yeah.
And that's such a big piece of it. And the more relationships you can build within the gym, the more likely people are to stay there forever, right? It's about providing that product as far as they're getting fitter and they're enjoying their fitness, but it's also helping them to build relationships within their community that keeps them engaged.
No, I mean, having a good community is the reason why most people stay.
Hugely. For most people, that's more important than the training itself.
Yeah. It's also really hard to do CrossFit and not be in shape, though.
Correct. If you're working hard, look, effort and consistency are more important. You can have the shittiest program in the whole wide world, but if you've got a high effort and a high consistency, you're probably going to make progress.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But we're definitely going to have a part 2, 3, and 4 at some point, but we'll end things up on the last 2 questions that everyone gets. What's your definition of health? Not necessarily the dictionary definition, but what is health to you?
What is health to me? Have you ever heard of the sickness-wellness continuum?
When you're sick, you want to be healthy, but when you're healthy, you don't think about being sick? That was just a guess.
Kind of. That kind of relates to it. So the concept is there's a straight line, right?
Okay.
And on the far left side of the line is sickness.
Yep.
On the right side is wellness. And then if you go all the way to the left side past sickness, there's death.
Okay.
And if you go all the way past wellness, you would find fitness.
Okay.
So you basically spend your life trying to climb the continuum this way.
Okay.
Because the weller or the fitter you are, the further up this way you are. And at some point, life is going to start pulling you down that continuum, right? At 90 years old, you're never going to be as fit as you might have been at 25 or 30.
Right.
It's just not feasible from a genetic standpoint.
Yeah.
So the further this way you are, when life starts pulling you down, the longer you have before death. And before death is, right, being in a wheelchair, not being able to take care of yourself and live life the way you want to. And so chasing this way so that you have more to slip down as you go into older age, I think that's one of the coolest concepts I've ever heard. And I'm like, that is really what it's about, right? It's being able to live life the way you want to, not necessarily in the gym, but outside of the gym for as long as possible.
Yeah. What's the name of the theory again? Or
the sickness wellness continuum.
All right, I like that. And then what's something from your life that you think people listening to the podcast would be able to take away as a positive?
I think I just gave a presentation to JJC's business community recently about being an entrepreneur. And one thing I think is super important for people is to recognize that you're never pot committed in life. And I think so many people, because they're 25 or 30 or 35, they've started down a path, whether that's a relationship, which I'm in no position to give relationship advice, or it's their career.
Yeah.
And they're like, now, because I've invested 5 years or 8 years, whatever, I need to do this forever.
Yeah.
And so they just end up doing something that they don't enjoy for the rest of their lives. And I think you never need to be pot committed. There's always another option. And so if there is something you're super passionate about, which for me was exercise physiology and training people, then you need to take that plunge. And it was scary as a motherfucker.
Yeah.
Going from making a steady, really good paycheck to spending every dollar I had saved to open our first location. But I make way less money now than I did in corporate America, but I am infinitely happier because I'm doing something that I'm passionate about. And so if someone does have a passion and something that they think about doing, but they're scared to do, I would encourage anyone to take that plunge because it probably is going to work out for the best. Because if you're truly passionate about something, you'll make that thing work and you'll be successful at it.
I love it. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
I really appreciate you having me. This was a blast.
This episode is brought to you by Vital Athlete. And listen up, this could make a real difference. I've been using Vital Athlete Freeze Roll-On for the last 6 months. I stopped using regular painkillers about 10 years ago because of the negative side effects on your liver and kidneys. Vital Athletes understands this. They've created a CBD roll-on specifically for pain and injury relief. Their Freeze Roll-On gives you fast-acting relief right where you need it, so you can keep going. If you care about getting the most out of every workout, then Vital Athlete is for you.